In this bass lesson, you'll learn about 5 blues traps that you as a bass player can fall into if you're not clued into the details of the blues. Hi, I'm Luke from becomeabassist.com, and if you want to know what these blues traps are, plus how to avoid them so you can slot into nearly any blues song with nearly any blues band, then this is the video for you. Let's get straight to it. I'm sure you've seen this before. It's the stock standard 12-bar blues that most people learn at the very start, and it sounds something like this. So you get 4 bars of the, you get 4 bars of the 1 chord, then 2 bars of the 4 chord, then back to the 1, 5, 4, 1 to finish. Now, if you're kind of new to playing blues bass, check out my other video, 6 authentic blues bass lines. It'll help you get through the basic blues form. I think what I played there was formula number 5 maybe, but don't quote me on that. However, this kind of standard 12-bar blues form can only get you so far. In fact, I'd say that the majority of blues songs you hear don't play this exact form, which means that there are all sorts of traps that you can fall into. Now, why does it matter for you? Well, if you keep playing these same stock standard blues chord changes and everyone else is playing a variation of this, you can kind of end up looking like a bit of an idiot. You'll make a bad impression, you'll be the one on the bandstand who doesn't get it, you know, that kind of thing. In the worst case scenario, you could lose gigs, fail auditions, and if you're playing with the wrong people, they can really lay into you about this kind of stuff. You can end up getting chewed out and all sorts of nasty things. I don't want that for you, and I know you don't want that for yourself. So listen up and I'll show you some of the most common traps and how to avoid them. Trap number 1 is sometimes called the quick change. This one is really simple. All you have to do is swap out the second bar, bar 2 of the 1 chord for a 4 chord. So in the key of A, instead of starting with 4 full bars on the A7, we're going to have 1 bar of A, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then D for 1 bar, and then 2 bars of A again. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? If we do it with the track, it'll sound like this. 4 chord. 1 chord. Yeah? Have another listen real quick. A, D. Back to the A. Just like that. Make sense? Now, when I get up to play with a bunch of new people and they call the blues, this is the first thing I'm listening and looking for. Do they play the 4 chord in the second bar? This is a really common thing. It's in tons of songs. Listen to the Blues Brothers' Sweet Home Chicago, Albert King's Stormy Monday, Cream's Crossroads, Sweet Little Angel, Skies Crying. I'm always tempted to say that the quick change happens more often than it doesn't happen. Whatever it is though, it really pays to listen for this trap and play that 4 chord in the second bar if you need. You can find the second trap, trap number 2, in the last 4 bars of the form. Instead of having the 5 chord going to a 4 chord, you can replace that with a 2 chord going to a 5 chord. And that is going to sound like this. Bit of a difference, right? It really sets up the end of the form really well. Now this one is more maybe type of a jazz blues type of idea, but you do hear it relatively often depending on who you listen to. For a really good example of this, check out Louis Jordan's Caledonia. And by the way, if you want all the blues forms written out for you in a handy PDF, plus all the backing tracks I'm using for this video, click the first link in the description, fill out the form on that page. You'll be sent everything from this video so you can start mastering these ideas and start avoiding these traps so you can look like a badass whenever you play the blues with just about anyone. And by the way, it's 100% free, so click that link down there to get started. Trap number 3 is playing a standard blues when you should actually be playing a minor blues. A standard blues will use dominant 7 chords, which have this major third in them, but a minor blues is obviously going to use minor chords, which obviously have this minor third in them instead. Now this isn't going to matter so much if you're just sticking with the roots and fifths, like the... That'd be fine, but if you're using any kind of bass line that uses a third of any of the chords, this is really going to mess you up. You don't want to fall into this trap. Have a listen to what it sounds like when you do. I'll play a regular blues bass line over a minor blues progression. It's the last note in that one. Chord. Oh my god. Sorry, I can't finish that form. That's just awful. Now if you do this, you're almost guaranteed to get chewed out, or at the very least get some really, really nasty looks. The fix is really easy though. Instead of using the major third, you'll just play the minor third. And when you do, you'll get something that's going to sound a little bit like this. Back to the start. 3, 4. Minor third, minor chord. See how much better that feels with the chords? D minor. You can also use this shape to play your minor triads. Just like that. Finish out the form like that. Now you could also just avoid the third completely, and that'd be fine too, like all those, something like that, that'd be fine too. Now a great example of a minor blues would be something like Stevie Ray Vaughan's Tin Pan Alley, so check that one out. Now usually you'll get told if something you're playing is a minor blues rather than a regular blues, but just keep your ears open just in case and change your approach to avoid falling into this trap if you do find yourself playing a minor blues. Now the other place you really have to be careful of is the turnaround of a minor blues. You'll see that 5-4 kind of turn around a lot, but you'll also see the flat 6 going to a 5 a lot of the time as well. So in the key of A, you'll have an F7 chord instead of the E7, and an E7 chord instead of the D minor 7. And that might sound something like this. Everything's going to be the same. First chord stays in A minor. You get 4 bars of that. Up to the D minor. A minor. Now instead of going to the 5, we're going to go to the flat 6. Check it out. Down to the 5 here. Something just like that. Now listen to B.B. King's The Thrill Is Gone for a really good example of a minor blues with this flat 6 turnaround. Totally badass. Trap number 4 happens when the length of the blues form changes from 12 bars to 16 bars, and there are a few ways this happens. First is just extending the first 4 bars to being 8 bars, so you end up with 8 bars of the 1 chord, and that'd sound something like this. Chord there. Just like that, yeah? Here how we have that long period of the 1 chord before we get the change to the 4. That's exactly the idea. Now for a good example of this, check out Gary Moore's Oh Pretty Woman. And by the way, that's also kind of a minor blues as well, so you can actually have multiple traps in the same song. Always keep your ears open to make sure you avoid these traps and know exactly what you're doing. Another common way that you'll see the form extended to 16 bars is by lengthening the turnaround, the last 4 bars. So instead of going 5 chord to a 4 chord and then going back to the 1, you go through 5-4 a bunch. before you finally get to that one chord. And that'll sound something like this. Four chord here, 4. Now 5/4 a whole bunch. When I say a whole bunch, it's like 3. Third time. And back to the one chord here. Yeah, something like that. Now, a great example of this is Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man. So check that one out. Long turnaround, 16 bar blues. All right, final trap, trap number 5, and that is playing blues with jazz musicians. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't play blues with jazz musicians. That's not my point at all. However, if you do, you should know that a lot of the time they'll be working from a very different set of chord changes. Well, when I say different, just highly modified. So let's start with the standard changes and see just how much we can modify it. Yeah. So first things you'll almost certainly find in a jazz blues are the quick change to the 4 chord in the second bar, as well as a 2/5 turnaround in the last phrase. We've already talked about those both, and you'll find them in jazz blues most of the time. Now, what we haven't yet talked about is putting a sharp 4 diminished chord in the 6th bar. So a bar of 4 going to sharp 4 as a diminished chord. This is a very common addition to a jazz blues. Also putting a 6th chord as a dominant chord in the 8th bar is super common as well. It leads to the 2 chord really well. And as well as adding a jazz turnaround to the last 2 bars instead of a more traditional blues turnarounds like I talk about in my blues turnaround video. So something like a quick 1/6 as the dominant 2/5 progression in the last 2 bars is super common. And for something like this, you wouldn't use any of the kind of classic blues bass line formulas. Instead, you'd play more of a walking bass line, and if you did, it'd sound something like this. One chord, 4 chord again, sharp 4 diminished, 1 chord, 6 is a dominant, 2 chord, 5, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Yeah? Lots of extra stuff in there, right? Now, this is actually quite a tame version of a jazz blues. There's a few extra levels we could go through with the harmony, but this is a good starting point if you're playing with jazz musicians. Now, there is quite a bit here with all these 5 traps and all the different versions of them. So if you want all these different variations all written out for you, plus the practice tracks to go with them, just click the first link in the description, fill out the form on that page, and I can send you absolutely everything totally free. It'll make it an absolute cinch to start practicing these different forms so you can avoid all these traps and make sure you become the bass player that everyone wants to play with when it comes to the blues. And like I said, 100% free and also 100% awesome. To recap though, you learned about the 5 bona fide traps that you can fall into as a bass player and how to avoid them. Trap number 1 was the quick change with the 4 chord in the second bar. Number 2 was the 2/5 turnaround rather than the 5/4 turnaround. Trap number 3 was when it's a minor blues rather than the standard blues that uses dominant chords. Trap number 4 was when the form changes to being 16 bars long and the 2 ways that happened. And trap number 5 was playing jazz musicians and the many ways that they can change up the chords but still keep it a blues. Cheers heaps for watching. It is always good to have some company. Make sure you hit up that bonus download with all the forms and the practice tracks and everything like that so you can get started learning and avoiding these traps. I'm sure it'll be super helpful for you. I'm Luke from becomeabassist.com and I'll see you in another video soon. Cheers.